Thank you, Chair. It is an honour to serve under your chairmanship today. I beg to move that this House has considered the impact of contactless rollout at railway stations on ticket prices. I very much appreciate the Minister attending today, and I am grateful for the opportunity to raise an issue of importance to constituents of Reigate relying on the rail network. I very much welcome the move towards contactless at railway stations. It is a transformational innovation that makes travel much quicker and easier. It allows those of us who like to cut it fine to just tap in without having to queue for a ticket or hurriedly navigate the ticket machine. The government's own case for the rollout is that it should make rail travel more convenient, more accessible and more flexible, and I agree that these ambitions are the right ones. Reigate Station in my constituency was one of those stations brought into the latest expansion of contactless in December of 2025. This was part of a wider scheme to roll out contactless ticketing across the south-east of England. Stations in neighbouring constituencies such as Dorking, Leatherhead and Ashtead were also included. The concern I want to put before the Minister today is that, for my constituents, this rollout has not simply introduced a new way for people to pay. It has also seen a change in what they pay, when they can travel, which discounts they can access, and whether long-established local arrangements still apply. So, on paper, contactless was presented to my constituents as a simple upgrade to how they pay. In practice, it is much more than this. I am not at all suggesting that operators have actively set out to conceal these price rises, but I do think it is fair to say they were not as clear, prominent or energetic as they should or could have been in explaining the full practical implications for passengers. Indeed, these changes were snuck through without any proper consultation or targeted communication. This is also particularly galling coming at a time when the government is freezing rail fares across the country to ease cost of living pressures. Why don't my constituents that rely on Reigate Station also deserve the same? Contactless was presented to people as simply making payment easier. So many passengers understandably assumed that they wouldn't have to pay more or change the time they travelled. Clearly, that is not what has happened at stations like Reigate. One very brief example will illustrate the point. If we look at the first off-peak train of the day, it is now nearly an hour later than before. This is a ticket price hike by stealth. For many years, Reigate passengers had a settled and well-understood expectation about which morning train to London marked the start of off-peak travel. That was an important part of how people planned their day, especially those travelling into London for leisure, appointments or family trips, rather than for the traditional commuting pattern. Under the new structure, because peak now runs until 9:30, and because Reigate's train pattern does not line up neatly with that cut-off, the practical effect has been to push the first off-peak option later. In other words, a journey that many local passengers had long understood to be available on an off-peak basis is no longer available on the same terms. Some can now travel only later, or else they must pay more. In this case, the rollout of contactless has had a measurable and negative impact on how some of my constituents travel by rail. Of course, it's important that I acknowledge that not every fare has increased and not every passenger has found themselves losing out. Southern notes that for many people, the contactless fare will be the same as a ticket bought on the day. And the whole premise of the system is that for many passengers making simple journeys, contactless will be convenient and in some cases better value. But that is only one part of the picture. The people who are most exposed to the downsides of this transition are the people least placed to absorb them. Existing discounts currently cannot be applied to pay-as-you-go contactless, and if someone has a rail card or is eligible for other discounts, including a child discount, it may be cheaper to buy a conventional ticket rather than use the contactless system. This means the passengers most affected are often families, older people, veterans, and others whose journeys may amount to something more than the default model of a full-fare adult simply tapping in and tapping out. Indeed, one of the strongest examples that has been raised with me several times is the family day out. A family in Reigate taking children into London for museums, sightseeing, or simply a day in the capital may now find that the day is squeezed at both ends. Outward travel on the old familiar basis is no longer available at the same time in the morning, while return travel is also shaped by the new peak restrictions in the evening. Ministers often speak, rightly, about encouraging leisure travel, public transport use, and access to our capital's cultural institutions. But if a system makes that kind of family journey harder to plan, less flexible, or more expensive, then something has gone wrong. There is also a fairness issue between neighbouring stations. My constituents look at nearby stations where these issues have not arisen, and they ask a very simple question: why are we being treated differently? Sitting on top of all of this, there is an unfortunate layer of confusion. I agree with the government in their diagnosis that rail fares are too complex and that simplification is necessary. On one level, that is plainly true. So surely they did not intend that the contactless rollout would leave informed local rail users having to spend time and energy working through the interplay between contactless singles, paper returns, travel cards, caps, discounts, peak times, and station-specific exceptions. We have to ask ourselves whether the new system is actually simpler from the passenger's point of view. Contactless undeniably offers much convenience, but I am concerned that it is not also offering clarity or value for money for all. I also gently say to the Minister that this rollout appears to have been a rigid programme. The correspondence I have seen suggests that operators had only limited room to preserve sensible local arrangements, even where a clear passenger need has been identified. If that is correct, then the Department should reflect on whether the rollout has perhaps been too inflexible. National consistency has its place, but so does common sense. And as we were just discussing there, in terms of the broader rollout to Surrey, which I hope that we will see, I think there is lots that can be learned and improved on so that other areas in Surrey don't suffer the same surprise and detrimental impact that we have in Reigate. So I would like to ask the Minister for 4 things. Firstly, what can be done for specific cases like Reigate, where contactless has caused unexpected problems? Will the Minister step in to help work towards restoring the long-standing off-peak position for the first morning journey so that passengers are not simply forced onto a later train or a higher fare? Secondly, will the Minister review the impact of the contactless rollout on passengers who depend on discounts, particularly railcard users and families travelling with children? It is difficult to argue that a system is fully fit for purpose when important categories of passenger are told that the purported benefit does not properly work for them. Thirdly, can the Department for Transport look into the question of anomalies between geographically neighbouring stations and whether these are forcing passengers to alter their behaviour, including using cars to drive to a further away station to secure a better deal? We are seeing people drive to Redhill rather than get the train from Reigate when they live closer to Reigate. Finally, can the Minister ensure that where these changes are rolled out in the future, passengers get genuinely clear station-specific guidance explaining what has changed, who benefits from contactless, who may be better off sticking with conventional tickets, and how any new restrictions operate in practice? My constituents have very much regretted not having access to this information. As I hope I have made very clear this afternoon, I support simpler ticketing, I support modernisation, and I support making rail travel more attractive. Contactless is a gateway to all of these, but it must work for all passengers. Regrettably, at the moment, we have a system that is leaving a sizable minority disadvantaged and paying more for less flexibility than they enjoyed before. I hope the Minister will engage with these points in the practical and constructive spirit in which I have raised them today, and I would certainly be delighted to work with him on finding workable solutions and taking the learnings as well for rollout to other stations, because overall it is a great thing. I very much welcome contactless coming to Reigate. It would just be really good if we can iron out some of these difficulties with the ticket pricing. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of contactless rollout at railway stations on ticket prices. Minister.
Thank you, Dr. Ellen Khan, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship and to respond to this debate. And may I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Reigate for securing it, and to everybody else, including the Honourable Members for Strangford, Esher and Walton, Mid-Bedfordshire and Woking, for their important contributions as we consider contactless payment rollout at railway stations and the impact that this has had on ticket prices. I want to start by reassuring the Honourable Member for Reigate that I've listened carefully to the concerns that she raises. I also want to thank her for the spirit of practicality and openness with which she has approached the question of implementation of contactless rollout. The Department for Transport, of course, needs to take on board the concerns of constituents in Reigate and across the areas where contactless ticketing has been rolled out to ensure that it provides what the intention of the scheme is there to do, which is to provide a more seamless, integrated and easy-to-use ticketing experience for passengers. I've taken on board some of the specific points that she's raised, especially on what can be specifically done for her constituents in Reigate, those concerns that she raised around off-peak issues and the sort of people who fall into those considerations of taking off-peak services, whether that be families visiting London, people relying on the social connections that the railway can bring. In terms of keeping implementation under review, this is something that the DfT does continuously, and anomalies in the system, such as the ones that she has raised, I will ensure are passed through to the Rail Minister. I think especially the point that she raised around guidance and communication is especially important too. We want people to benefit from contactless rollout, and that means that they need to be fully informed about what the implications are of these changes. So I thank her for raising those raising those points in such a spirit of practicality and openness. Now, I know more broadly that the Honourable Lady is a determined advocate on behalf of her constituents. She understands, as well as the Department for Transport, that our railways are catalysts for cultural connection and for economic growth. And I believe her constituents in Reigate should be able to benefit from them to the same extent as every other part of the United Kingdom. She's raised the challenges faced due to limited transport connectivity, and I welcome the opportunity to respond in more detail to those concerns today. On the matter of expanding pay-as-you-go with contactless ticketing at Reigate Station specifically, I appreciate how important flexible ticketing and payment options are for passengers, and I want to provide some information on the progress that is being made on the points that she raised. So, on the 7th of December last year, we introduced changes to the paper fare pricing at 50 stations across the South East in preparation for the launch of the pay-as-you-go ticketing system. A week later, on the 14th of December, pay-as-you-go was launched at 30 stations, including Reigate, enabling passengers to benefit from simpler, easier and more flexible ticketing. The new simplified single-leg price fares, like those already successfully implemented in London, mean there is now just one peak and off-peak fare with consistent restrictions across those services. Prices were adjusted so that a single is around half the price of a return ticket, though I am cognizant of the anomalies that has created that the Honourable Lady has pointed out today. This move to single-leg pricing does unfortunately mean that some passengers may pay more, and that is something that I will reflect through to the Rail Minister, but it is also important to note that this in turn unlocks more flexibility in return, while other passengers may see a reduction in their ticket price as well. These changes apply not only to pay-as-you-go but also to paper ticket prices. Now, we are already seeking to roll out this improved flexibility in pricing and ticketing beyond London and the South East, and we are now firmly in the delivery phase of launching pay-as-you-go to more than 90 stations in both Greater Manchester and the West Midlands, though I take on board the point made by the Honourable Member and the Honourable Member for Woking about how we have to ensure that we learn the lessons of the rollout as we bring it to more places so that we can fully secure the benefits of what a contactless system may bring. Greater Manchester is already benefiting from newer, simpler fares in advance of pay-as-you-go ticketing, and the West Midlands will have full, integrated, multimodal fares and ticketing from day one of their go live. Alongside this, we are also testing other ticketing innovations through digital pay-as-you-go trials. 3 have already gone live across the North and the Midlands since September last year. This will help us understand how best to deliver this new innovative ticketing option to meet the needs of passengers. Now, more broadly, the Honourable Lady raised the point around consistency of communications and a seamless experience for passengers. As we move toward delivering Great British Railways, our priority is to strike the right balance between affordability for passengers and taxpayers to ensure that everyone gets a fair deal, but also to run the railway in a more holistic way to ensure that passengers get a consistent experience from wherever they travel. GBR will enable this more consistent ticketing practice across the network, ensuring that wherever people travel, they can be confident that they are buying the right ticket and getting the best fare for their journey. Now, of course, we must also acknowledge the very real cost of living pressures that are facing many households, including households in Reigate. Transport costs form a significant part of that mix, and we must balance the need to fund the railway through passenger revenue with the need to reduce the burden on taxpayers. Now, for too long, passengers have endured relentless fare increases. Between 2010 and 24, fares rose by around 60%, placing real pressure on hard-working families and commuters. This government is committed to turning the page, and in March we took the significant step of freezing regulated fares for the first time in 30 years. We are taking immediate action to ease that burden and to begin building longer-term and more affordable railway. So in March, Chair, we took the significant step of freezing regulated fares for the first time in 30 years. We are taking immediate action to ease that burden and begin building longer-term and more affordable railway. For instance, thanks to this government, the price of travel cards will be frozen until March 27, meaning that weekly and daily caps will remain unchanged from 2026. This will make a real difference for people who rely on pay-as-you-go travel in places like Reigate, allowing them to reach their caps sooner and ensuring that the cost of their journeys does not rise significantly throughout the year. These decisions will put more money back into the pockets of working people, and it forms part of our wider plans to bring the railway into public ownership to create a simpler and more reliable network that delivers for passengers. Now, the Honourable Lady also highlighted the challenges constituents face more broadly in terms of transport connectivity. And in terms of securing reliable rail and bus connectivity, we recognise these concerns and have a clear plan to address them by equipping major city regions with the tools they need to roll out ticketing locally that reflects local travel patterns. This will include a shared technology solution allowing for integrated pay-as-you-go with contactless across different transport modes. And we will set out further details on this in due course, while of course taking into account the specific challenges that the Honourable Lady has raised as part of her speech. To conclude then, Chair, I would like to assure the Honourable Member that this government is firmly committed to improving the travel experience for her constituents and for passengers across the network. That means simplifying fares, making them more flexible to meet the needs of passengers and delivering innovative solutions that fully realise the benefits of a truly modern transport network. I'd like to reassure her that I've taken the specific points that she raised about rollout on board today. I'll ensure that they're reflected through to the Rail Minister, and I thank her for her intervention in this incredibly important topic. Thank you, Chair.